So I've always been really interested in filters and all that kind of stuff. However, I've never really been interested in filters that tend to be at the front side of your lens. You know, the screw-in filters, even the matchbox filters. I always think that they tend to be a little bit cumbersome, especially when on the field trying to actually, use them the way they're intended to be used. Every single time, I tend to either get them dirty, get some scuffs on there, unintentional marks, or most importantly, sometimes I even do forget the actual filters, especially if you've got so many different variety of filters. It gets even worse every single time you want to change lenses between primes. If you're stuck with, let's just say, a 24 to 70, most likely you can actually stick with one filter and just leave it on and then just keep zooming in and zooming out. However, if you are the type of filmer just like myself, I tend to stick with primes. I always like the look of primes. You can actually stop them down faster than the zooms. They tend to max out at 2.8. However, in my case, I tend to actually just stick with primes. But the problem is that every single lens, provided they're not exactly the same manufacturer. So I've got a Sigma lens, I've got a Canon lens, and then I've got other companies' lenses as well. They tend to actually give off a slightly different type of tint, and it gets exaggerated when you've got a filter at the front. This is basically a filter that is actually called a clip-on filter. That happens to be the filter that's clipped onto your camera body as opposed to the actual lens. There are some filters that actually clips at the back of your lenses, especially those, the ultra wide primes like the 14mm Sigma, etc. Those tend to have like clip-on filters that you can clip at the back of the lens. This actually stays with your body itself and it clips onto your inside part of your mount. I'll show you quickly. As you can see, it's just like a conventional little clip-on filter. However, it's got some magnets right at the top and that actually clips on the inside of your mount, and it just basically stays fixed on that. Now, the thing that actually appeals to me is because most of my lenses, I tend to stop them down to f2. So even this Sigma Art lens, I tend to stop it down to f2. All of the other lenses, stop them down to f2. Now, the great thing about this is that if you tend to actually keep a consistent aperture, you can actually use this clip-on filter, and they do a variety of them. Now, this one is a neutral density filter as well as a mist filter as well. To be specific, it's 3-stop ND combined with a quarter mist filter attached to it. So it's basically one of those type of filters that actually combines them together as opposed to you stacking filters. And that's the great thing about this one as well. You can actually get some really stylized video and photography with this one. It's not just for video, you can actually use this for photography as well. Now in this video, I just want to check it out on the inside of my my little home studio setup. Currently right now I've got it exposed to f1.4 at the base ISO of 800. 1/50 is shutter speed. You get my drift with the rest of the stuff. However, what I want to do is actually just clip this on and see how dark the environment, everything will still be exactly the same, and then I'm going to bounce it back to around about 1 stop overexposed. I did actually put a little backlight over there as well, so you guys can actually see the bloom haziness effect to it. And just for in case you guys are not aware, I do use a Canon R6. This is the Mark 1 version. I know there's a Mark 2. And I use always the Sigma 24mm f1.4. It's currently at f1.4. I tend to stop it down to f2. However, for this test, it is at f1.4. Let's get on, move on. So currently right now, you already see what the image actually looks like. So I will zoom in so you guys can see how sharp the image can actually get. I do actually have a softbox just out of frame on here. Okay, so currently right now I've actually got the mist filter on, and I've actually set my exposure to the camera to about 5,000 just to showcase how much of a step up I had to boost my ISO. I don't really want to increase the key light just yet because of course I want to see make sure that the background and everything else, the exposure on that side is similar to the original exposure. I might actually set up the key light, but of course with the Canon EOS R6 I can actually bump the ISO quite considerably high anyways, without actually introducing so much noise, even though the noise on the onboard camera is actually set to completely off. I really do like this little clip-on filter, especially if you do tend to shoot outside and want to actually capture everything at f1.4. I tend to be that kind of person at the beginning, but however now I tend to just stop down to f4 just to get the overall exposure the way I like it, and at the same time also the sharpness. But in case you guys actually want some really stylized photography or even cinematography, you can actually use this. However, you do want to be a little bit careful when using this outside, especially when there's a bright sunlight hitting you, or you're actually backlit or anything like that, because the overall luminous effect actually does get sometimes in the way. It might actually desaturate the picture just a little bit too much. However, if it's just a small light source and stuff like that, or you can actually control the light source yourself, then of course you can actually limit any type of harsh light in the background. But if you use this out in the open, I would highly suggest not to have majority of your frame to be just the sky, because especially if it's just like a summer day when the sun is out at noon, can be a little bit overpowering, and then everything just becomes a little bit too hazy, as if you kind of shot everything out of focus, especially if you're shooting at f1.4 or f1.8. Alright, this is a perfect example. Currently I have got my exposure completely native, so 1/50th. However, with the Sigma R 24mm, even with the 3-stop ND, I would still have to actually stop it all the way down to, what is it now? Let's have a look. Yeah, so it's currently f3.2, and it's still overexposed according to my meter by about 1.5 stop. Okay, so now I can stop it all the way down to f1.4 and have the exposure just right. There we go. Now let's talk about the cons of actually using this clip-on filter whilst I'm actually recording in native picture profile. So this isn't C-Log, this isn't any type of log, this is just a standard picture profile with the contrast turned down. This is, I think, where you might actually come into a couple of problems. Mainly is if you want to actually change anything, you can't. You have to actually remove the lens, you have to get close to your sensor and you have to actually take that filter off. Now, the longevity of that is you might come into a problem where you might accidentally damage something, whether it's your shutter curtain or whether it's your actual sensor or whether it's actually something to do with your mount. Something could actually go horribly wrong, and the fact that you're so close to the camera's heart, this is a critical point where you have to actually be extremely careful. You have to make sure that it is one of those filters that practically almost stays on there and you rarely take it out. And if you do, you got to make sure that you're in a safe environment where there's not a lot of dust, not a lot of leaves, not a lot of anything blowing around in the air that could actually potentially get in your sensor or damage your shutter curtain. With other filters, you can actually have a variable ND. You can adjust it on the fly. However, with this one, because it's deep inside the mount and it's sealed off, you can't really do anything to it other than just leave it on, take it off, or you might actually need to get multiple different kinds for different types of scenario. Now, if you're actually doing it as a hobbyist and stuff like that, then it can get expensive. Other than that, here's the standard picture profile. What do you guys think? You know, is it actually nice? Does it look good? Not in log. This is, I think, this is the, you know, the selling point, where because you don't actually have it in a log profile, no 10-bit, no customization, but you still just want to actually produce some good quality images, slightly different to your standard Canon, you know, neutral, standard, automatic picture profile, then this is, I think, where it actually can actually hit off. Hopefully you guys did actually enjoy that video. It was actually fun for me to actually make, testing out different types of filters, what kind of look you can actually get, even with the combination of log or no log. So at the start of the video, I did actually record this intro in C-Log 3. However, the outro currently right now, I'm actually recording in standard picture profile, which I've always had issues with. Always looked just a little bit over sharpened and it just looked a little bit weird. So at least now it does actually look kind of nice. I'm not going to say cinematic and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted a little bit of a flattering, softer look, and this works perfectly fine. So currently what you're watching is still in no log profile. Of course it isn't actually meant to be used just solely for video. You can actually use this for photography as well. I think that's what it's more intended for. However, when it comes to photography, I think quite a lot of people enjoy actually manipulating their images, especially if they record it in RAW anyways. Not too sure if you can actually see that, but that right there is a ND filter, but it's not just a normal ND filter. It's actually a VND filter. So of course, stay tuned for that. I will definitely be uploading a video on this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.